Happy Saturday.
Oh my goodness. I hope everybody had a good week. Krista, I know your week was a little stressful.
Yeah, it was a mixture of good and bad this week. So Jordan is home, so that is good. He's
Good.
still in pain. That is bad. Yeah. It was a rough couple weeks, but okay.
Sorry, I'm looking something up really quick. I wanted to see something.
Gloria, are you 3 hours earlier than me?
9
Was
a.m.
it? Yeah, it's 9. Okay. Yes, 3 hours.
Oh, that's not too early.
That's so crazy to me.
It's like,
yeah. Well, that's something that was in the book too. Like the mom of one of the people on Flight 93 living in California, and it was like still early morning, and she was just waking up and like, yeah, that was time zone. They're so weird.
You know what? I'm on my phone. If anybody can see us, I'm on my phone. Oh, okay, there it goes. Woo!
Echo.
Because I was like, it's showing like that people are here, but then I like put it up on my phone to make sure, and there was nobody. It was like blank. So, oh my goodness! All right, I think it's working now. So, yay! All right, that makes more sense. Hello,
look at them all.
We can see you. Okay, good.
Yay!
For a minute there, I'm like, wait a minute, where did everybody go? So, yay. Thank you guys all for showing up today. And yeah, I hope everybody, I won't say enjoyed your read of the book.
I know, I was trying to describe it to people. I'm like, I love this book, but I feel weird loving this book.
It's like such an important book, but it just like punches you right in the gut at the same time.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
So, I think that's a good way of saying it. Important. Like it's an important read. It's important to remember. It's important to hear different perspectives of the day. And yeah, it's hard. But yeah, enjoy is such a funny word, right? Because I say I enjoyed it too, but did I really like enjoy it? Not the same way that I enjoy other books, but yeah.
It was one of those, like, I remember when I first decided to read it, I'm like, I'm going to take some time with it because it's going to be hard to read.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to take my time. And then once I got reading it, I couldn't put it down. I was just so captivated by it. I could not put it down. And I read it in like 3 days, which is fast for me because I'm a really slow reader. But it was just one of those that I'm like, it was ripping my heart out, but I was so captivated by what was going on.
Yeah, it was like on my heart.
Yeah,
reading it, so much emotional weight there. But
yeah, I love this comment from Amy. She had some of her students listen to part of it, and yeah, the astronaut story. Like he was the only American, and he like recorded the whole thing from space. Like I thought that was the coolest, like perspective to have. So.
I made the mistake of starting this book before bed. Like thinking like, oh, I'm gonna like read an hour of it. And my husband was out of town, and it was just like, I mean, I'm glad I started the book, but it was so hard because then I couldn't go to bed, and I was just so overwhelmed and just sitting there like crying, like what, you know. But yeah, important read. I'm so glad I read it.
I've had so many dreams about 9/11 in the past 2 weeks. So many. I can't stop thinking about it. So, I'm just going to kind of jump straight in, and we're just going to get right into it. Because I feel like this book, there was so much information in it that was brand new information to me that gave me such a different perspective of the day as a whole, and preconceived notions that a lot of us, I think Krista, you were probably the closest to it of the four of us. Gloria, I don't know where you were at that time, 20 years ago, but just all the preconceived notions that we have about the day, this to me like knocked a bunch of them down and was just like, wait a minute, no, you think this is what happened, but really it was this way. So what are some of the things in the book that you felt that way about?
Before we do that, can we just share like our own, because this is an oral history, right?
Yeah.
And we like real quick just share, because it's one of those events that you will always remember what you were doing, where you were. It's like our generation's version of like JFK being shot or whatever, like that moment where you'll always remember what was going on. Yeah.
So we can do that. And then in the comments too, everybody that's here, share your stories as well. We want to hear everybody's stories, because I have a feeling we're all going to have a different perspective, and some of us are going to be closer to it than others. And so, yeah. Krista, do you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, I'm probably the oldest of the four of us that are here, and maybe even in the comments, I don't know. So I was working at a Bible college. So I was in my late 20s when, or mid to late 20s, I guess, when this happened. And I'm from New York, not New York City, but like 6 hours away. And at this Bible college, our second year students spend 2 months in New York City at the beginning of the year. So we had students that were in Queens, and our morning, I watched, like someone told us, word got around in the staff really quickly, and we all turned on TVs, and I was standing in the admissions office watching the first tower burning, and then we watched the plane. That was right on the news, watching the plane hit the second tower. And it was just like unbelievable. And one of our first reactions after the shock and whatever, we had to really quickly try to track down all of our students, because we immediately had parents calling us to find out if their kids were anywhere near there. And we did have teams that were supposed to go out and be in that area that morning, but for different reasons, like nobody was in the area, which is amazing, like total miracle. But we had students stand on the roof. Our building that they go to was in Queens. And so that we had students standing on the roof of the building in Queens, watching the whole thing in person. And they stayed for their internship, but everything changed, and they started ministering at fire stations and police stations and bringing food and setting up prayer stations around the city and just praying with people. And the whole, like the stories that we heard from like firsthand students that were there was unbelievable. And we had like a huge prayer, President's Chapel is that day. So like all of the organizations that are connected, we all get together on every Tuesday anyway, and it was on a Tuesday, so we all got together. It was just like a prayer day for like hours and hours, just spending time in prayer and catching news updates throughout the day. But yeah, the biggest thing was that we had people, like we had students that were there, and we had to make sure that we all would like track down everybody and make sure every single person that was under our watch was okay, and they were, thankfully. Forever changed. It was PTSD for a lot of them, just seeing that with their eyes, like not through the news. But yeah, it was it was tough. I had been there. I have a picture of myself, like my friend laid on the ground and took a picture with the towers behind me from when I was young. Like, wow. I've been there. I've seen them. Like, yeah, it's crazy. But that's my story.
Wow. How about you, Gloria?
So I was 6 years old, and I don't remember, I think also being on the West Coast, as you guys mentioned at the start of this and in the book, I assume I was sleeping. Like, I think my school start was like 8 a.m. on, normal weekdays. So I think I was in sleep, and I honestly have no recollection of like turning on the news or my parents like telling me anything. Either they were watching and like didn't feel like sharing at the time, or it's weird. I like remember some parts of my childhood, but I don't remember anything about 9/11. So I definitely feel like disconnected from it. I sort of feel like I missed it. But since I've been to New York a few times and like been to the memorial, and so I like, read about it, researched about it. And yeah, reading this book was incredible. But yeah, I do have like a disconnect. I don't have a story of the actual day because I think I was too young and on the West Coast. So it sort of was like, yeah, kind of like what's happening on the other side of the world. So
yeah.
What about you, Lindsay?
I was a sophomore in college, and I feel like I was like late to class, and I'm going to class with my friend Jessie. Like I could tell you she was wearing jean shorts and a pink top. Like, and my husband now, who was my boyfriend then, called me and he's like, plane just flew into the World Trade Center. And I'm like, okay, I'm late for class. I'm like, why are you telling me this? Like, it just happened last week. It's like, no big deal, right? Because I want to say not that far before it, like a little plane flew into a building. And so I just thought it was that again. I don't know if it happened in Chicago or where it happened, but like I totally brushed it off as like no big deal. I need to get to class. And they get into class and it barely really even starts, and all of a sudden the whole campus shuts down and everybody's like kind of explaining what happened. And I went home and I'm like, oh my God, I just brushed off this huge thing and literally watched TV the entire rest of the day. So kind of a weird story of like, I didn't think anything of it at first, but also, I mean, I'm in the Midwest, and I just kind of like Gloria said, I felt like I was watching a movie, like it wasn't real yet.
I feel like a lot of Americans felt like they were watching a movie. Like it was such an unbelievable thing that it looked like a movie. I mean, it did.
And just I think I remember more of the unknowns the days after that of like, okay, like, are we at war? And the city I live in manufactures a number of military vehicles, and we are on, like, there are times where there are threats to where I live because of what they make here. So that was a little worrying. And then not long after that, my brother joined the Marines because of the events of that day, and served in Iraq for a while. So it was more like the after effects probably hit me more that specific day. But
I was a junior in high school, and it was second period, I think, and we went into class, and it was our like study hall period. And the teacher that I had for that period was a social studies teacher, and he had a TV in there going already. And he's like, they basically told us what was going on. A plane flew into the World Trade Center, and we watched the second plane fly into the second tower. And the thing is at that time, our standardized testing was going on for 10th grade, and they let the kids finish their tests. They didn't interrupt them. So they had no idea what was going on until their tests were done for the day. But the rest of the school, like all the TVs were on. We were watching it throughout the whole day. Occasionally you'd run into, like, I think my choir teacher was like, turn the TVs off. And she's like, no, we need to go about our day. Like, didn't want like it to consume our day sort of thing. But where I was at, and Lindsay, probably you too, we were only a couple hours outside of Chicago. And so that was something we were like, and I know that they evacuated all the high rises in Chicago because they didn't know at that point. And I think that becomes clear in the book as well, is nobody knew what was going on. Communication back, 20 years ago was not the same it is today. And so they didn't know. And so a lot of people were really scared because we were like right on the flight path to Chicago. And so we didn't know what that really meant for anybody. And so that was kind of what I remember, is just sitting in that class watching people running. And it was, it was really terrifying. I've seen so many stories in the comments that are just right here. Maryland.
Wow.
Close to the Pentagon. And I think reading about the Pentagon was one of the areas that I learned the most about that, and and Air Force One in the book, because, we hear a lot about the World Trade Center, but we don't really know as much about the Pentagon, or that wasn't as broadly, it wasn't on a broadcast, like it wasn't on the news as much. And so I can't even imagine.
Yeah, I think even in the book, they mentioned the reporters that were in DC. They were like, this is the biggest story of our lives, and we're not even going to make it on the page because New York City is more intense, which is crazy.
Right. And the power struggle at the Pentagon between you have all your military who are used to taking charge and the fire department being like, no, this is us, step back. Like, that was interesting to not even think of that.
Yeah. Here's another one. Sarah was teaching, student teaching and trying to answer questions from fourth graders who have no idea what's happening and are just terrified. Because that's one of the things too, is the kids feed off of the adult fear. And in the chapter in the book that talks about the 9/11 generation, I feel like that's something that I gained from that, is the younger kids and how the reason they remember it is because they could tell people were scared and that it was a big deal. And so, yeah. And also trying to process it yourself, it just takes on a whole different perspective.
I think something that stands out to me is how the news was everybody's source of information, because there wasn't easy access to cell phones and everything was clogged up because of people trying to call home, and there was no social media. It was all the news. And it's so funny that like now there's such a distrust of the news, but on 9/11, like that was our source of information.
That's
like,
how
we learned everything.
That's how they were figuring out what was going on.
It's crazy.
Now you never hear that.
I mean, even now with like what's going on across the world in Afghanistan, it's like you can't even watch one news source and it's the one thing. It's all political and it's so weird.
Yeah.
Totally agree with you. So strange how that's changed so much.
Such a different, It's funny, not funny, but it's crazy to, like, I could remember flying pre 9/11 and how different, like, all the processes in an airport are so different now than they were 21 years ago, right? Like, there was no security. I mean, it was like a breeze to get up onto your plane. You used to be able to go right up to the gate and welcome people home. There's so many changes just in like daily life and travel, in particular in travel, that are so different now from what it was before. Crazy.
Yeah, I think this is interesting too. She's in 6th grade and she didn't really understand what that meant. A lot of people, unless you were familiar with New York, the World Trade Centers were just like, what's that?
What is that? Yeah.
Okay, it's a big building, but why is this important? A lot of business people probably did, but as kids, like, I didn't know what the World Trade Center was. I just saw these 2 huge skyscrapers and I'm like, what in the world is happening? But I didn't understand the significance of what that meant, with just the economic, significance of that. All right. Let's move on kind of to what we were talking about before. What are some...
sorry.
No, that's totally fine. I meant to start with that, and my notes are kind of surprise, not super organized. All right. So what were some preconceived notions of the day that you had that were kind of debunked while you were reading the book? Do you have any?
I think definitely the communication, what we touched on, like the disorganization of the events, and like even the presidents and like our people in government receiving information later than even people watching the news, and like the disconnect of everything. Like, I cannot imagine that experience, and really I put in perspective how much people probably did feel like this is the end of the world because no one knows what's going on and anything can happen. Or even the thoughts of like that there's like hijacked planes left and right, like where's the end of it? Like that uncertainty and unknowing of what's going on. I didn't really have that perspective or understanding of 9/11 in my point of view. It was like, yeah, it was, 4 planes, people got together and like took care of things and it, shut it down quickly, but it was totally not that experience at all.
It could have been so much worse because we were not ready.
We were not ready. And I think that's something that I kind of got from it is like, because I think before I would think, why didn't they just put military planes in the air and shoot them down? Or
there were no
weapons
weapons on
or,
it.
and
That
there
was
were
my
weapons on board. Like, I didn't know that. I have no, understanding of military warfare and air fights, like airplanes and what it takes to get weapons onto airplanes that could take down a plane, not to mention the fact that you don't want to shoot down a plane full of civilians. But I think that was something that I definitely thought was, why didn't they just stop them? Especially after the second plane hit and they realized something was going on. Why did they let something hit Pentagon? And it
was too late.
It was already happening.
Yeah.
I think too, like, we had been in a period of relative peace. Like, after the Cold War, like, there was decades where there was no severe threat. I'm sure there were little threats on our country, but like, there was nothing major. There were things I'm sure that we were keeping our eye on around the world. Like, I don't know, I'm not in the
but nothing.
So I'm sure that they had their eye on things, but there was nothing that felt like a severe threat. And now we kind of live in a world. I mean, we've literally been at war for the last 20 years. Like, we just pulled out of Afghanistan after 20 years, right? Like, we've literally been in a state of war. So we're on constant threat mentality now. But that was not the case pre 9/11. Like, there was no focus on security, and I did appreciate that one security guard in the towers who like made the tower evacuate a couple times a year and like had his routines down. Like, he was on top of it, even though it wasn't like a necessity. And so I'm sure people grumbled and like, oh my word, we have to do this again. But like, he was doing his thing. And I just know, I mean, it said he saved hundreds of lives that day because he had his protocol in place and he helped people get out. And I think they said, even in the building, I forget, it was Escobar, maybe his name. He said that they told them to go back, that their tower was safe. It was the other tower. Everybody go back to your office. And he's like, no, get out of the building.
Right.
He went against what the PA system said. He's like, no, everybody out for his, whatever company it was that he worked for in the building.
That was something to me that I didn't understand. Like, the building right next to yours is literally on fire because a huge aircraft flew into it.
Well, they didn't know a plane flew into it.
Well, but still, like, there was a massive explosion and massive fire going on. Wouldn't you evacuate the area? Like,
get out, absolutely.
But they're like,
well, that's
you're fine.
Like, yeah,
you're fine.
But that's the buildings are made so there can be a fire on this level and everybody down here is fine because
it's okay
of how it's constructed, not
just
the extreme, right?
But that's because you live in a post 9/11 world, and now that's your mentality. But that was not the mentality pre 9/11. Like,
people were
just wasn't.
Then. People didn't.
So
like, that was like another thing. Like, something happened, and you're thinking, "Well, get out, duh! Like, move."
Yeah,
we're like, "Wow, this crazy fire! Are we gonna like put it out?" And everyone's just standing around watching. And you're like,
"Yeah,
no, leave.
You might want to get off the streets." This is something for sure for me that was a massive thing in the book that brought a whole new light to the day for me. I know President Bush has gotten a severe amount of backlash and people that were upset with him because he didn't go right back to DC or he didn't do a press conference right away and he did all this. And hearing from his Secret Service and the people on board Air Force One and realizing he wanted to go back and they pretty much had kidnapped him and were like, no, we don't care at this point. We get to decide. You don't get to boss us around. We're in charge of you and we're going to take you, where we want you to go. You don't get an option. And I did not know that. Like, I did not know that at all. And the fact that, like, even after he went to Louisiana and then he went to Nebraska, because one of the only places he could talk to his military leaders was in Nebraska.
Yeah.
And now he carries a briefcase with him that has that set up in it.
Football.
But back then, they were running on the same comm systems as the rest of the world, and they were so overrun that day that he didn't know where his wife was. The president of the United States couldn't find his family, and that for me was a huge, like, I had that, like, why didn't he go back to DC? Why didn't he do this? Why wasn't he more present that day? And it's just kind of realizing he didn't have an option.
He had other shit to do. I did like the part where I think it was his chief of staff when he realized I need to go tell the president this, and he's in front of these kids, and it needs to be short and to the point, and I need to do it in a way that he can't react right away, and how he said those words and then stepped back so that the president couldn't say, like,
he was just
flawless.
It was so methodical.
Yes, like so. Oh, it gives me chill. Like, such a good job. Such a good job.
Absolutely. But yeah, just I think a lot of the stuff from Air Force One for me was super eye-opening. I thought it was funny when they landed in Louisiana and they're like, don't tell anybody where we're at. And then the one guy like called his wife. He's like, I can't tell you where I'm at. And she's like, well, you're here, right?
You're in there. It's on the TV.
Well, that kind of, but the fact that when they loaded the plane, they were loading it with all this food and like they were prepared to be in the air for however long they needed to be to keep him, obscure.
It was amazing to me to learn to see all the logistics of getting every plane out of the sky.
Oh my goodness.
That just blows me away. How many flights that must have been, and all those air traffic controllers, and they had to land at the nearest airport immediately.
Yeah.
Like what a stressful day for all those air traffic people. Like,
Krista,
I'm coming in.
Have you read
the Newfoundland? It's the book about the Newfoundland town. Yes. No, but I really want to. I don't know.
The Day the World Comes to Town. If you're blown away, like you will love that book. And there's a musical that's amazing too.
There's a what?
A musical.
There's a musical on
For
that.
real?
Yeah.
They're airing it.
I love musicals.
I think it's my announcement video for this. Kara from Wild Book Garden they're like airing it somewhere.
Yeah, they had some of it on Good Morning America yesterday.
The musical is getting aired somewhere. Yeah.
And I saw it. It's really good. But if you want more like this, I wouldn't say this is not heartwarming. That The Day the World Came to Town is heartwarming.
Yeah. I'm looking at that.
I don't even understand.
But that was
traffic people do their jobs.
I know, right?
No, it was so amazing to me. I have no idea either. The fact that they were able to do that. And I think they knew there was only like 1 or 2 planes who didn't go to the closest, and they knew which 2 they were. Like, what? How do you even know that? Like, it's amazing to me.
Well, and the other thing that I thought was really interesting is that they couldn't find the planes because they had no radar pointed over the U.S. Mm-hmm. It was all pointed out because anything over the country was considered friendly airspace. And so they couldn't find the planes because there was no radar. I bet for dang sure that is not the case anymore. I mean, it can't speak to that, but I would venture to say that probably is not the case anymore. And the fact that they had to turn on like different things and call like Russia and China and be like, we are not launching nukes. Please do not retaliate. Like, we have stuff going on here. The things that you don't think about as a lowly citizen like us. Like, it's just,
Another kind of wow moment for me was that the firefighters needed to go up. I was like, what are you're going to climb 100 stories? Like it didn't make sense to me, I guess, pre-reading this book, thinking like, the firefighters were there to like get people out of the buildings. But I didn't realize like the majority of their goal was like get to the top, like get to the top of the fire out. And it's like, why would you do that? Like, that's so, I don't know, even like, how do you put it out?
I get winded climbing up one flight of stairs in my house without 70 pounds of gear on. So,
a friend of mine is at Lambeau Field today doing the 100-story climb. So they have firefighter gear and firefighter gear on as they're climbing.
Wow.
Stories. That's what she did today.
That like gives me chills.
Yeah.
I've been crying.
Yeah, and it's in honor of 9/11. Yeah, it's so.
Krista, go get your tissues.
I know. Wow.
Mm.
Okay.
But yeah.
And like some of them wear like weighted I can't even see weighted stuff, like as if they're carrying the
Gear.
gear. Yeah, just.
I'd be like one flight up, and I'd be like,
I'll just stay here in direct traffic.
Right.
I'll give you water at the bottom of this. Oh man.
But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think that was such an impact for me. It was all the personal stories, and the amazing stories of some people who survived, having been buried or caught behind a sheetrock that wouldn't move. And oh my gosh, there's so many little stories that were just unbelievable.
Krista, did you pick up that our that Wells was mentioned in this book too?
Yes, I did. Yep.
Another awesome book is The Red Bandana.
Oh man, so good.
Cry. I want to cry just thinking of it, but it was so good. Like I aspire to be the person who would go back in and help. Like, I don't know. And then the other part that broke my heart is the airport security guy that let the two go through and like helped.
I had a hard time reading about that at the end, where he like was talking about how he was suicidal and oh my goodness, and how people looked at him differently, and I just my heart just broke into a million pieces for him, and the weight that has had to carry on him his whole life.
Like, talk about, I mean, I feel like he
was just doing his job.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
He was totally just doing his job. Oh my goodness. It was just wild.
I can't imagine the weight of that. Like, you could tell him to it, like, till you're blue in the face that he was just doing his job, but he carries the weight of that. How heartbreaking. Whew.
I think somebody had mentioned in the comments, I'll mention it here really quick, but there is a 9/11 documentary that National Geographic did called One Day in America. It's 6 episodes long, and it is phenomenal. A lot of the stories that are in the book are talked about there, and you can like see the people 20, and they talk about it 20 years later. It's so well done. And I completely just lost my train of thought. I was going somewhere with that, and I don't remember where now.
Go watch it.
Go
watch it.
Yeah.
What were you talking about, Krista? Right before that. I don't remember now.
You think we're going to remember?
Yeah, I don't know.
We're older than you, Amanda.
This happened. You guys think I'm just disorganized? No, this is just a permanent state of being for me. My mind's a mess.
Well, it was cool to see, like, so you get the stories, the personal stories, and you get to see some of those people in the documentary.
Yes.
Whose stories you heard them, like, so, their like oral history.
And Joe Jonas and Jefferson or Johnson and Frank Rosano and all of them, they're all in it. And so it was really cool getting to like see them. And there's a ton of video footage from the day that like you would have never.
I watch it like this.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I saw a clip. I think, what was I watching last night? I think I don't know what it was, some special. And it was from inside like a restaurant as the cloud came through.
That's on that documentary.
And it went from like normal to pitch black.
But it was progressive.
Yes.
That was the freaky thing. Somebody had like pulled a woman off the street and she was arguing with him about like, my stuff's out there. Let me go get my stuff. Let me out. And he's like, no. And he kept her, like barred the door and kept her inside. And then you see the debris cloud come down the road and it's perfectly sunny. And then it kind of goes dusky and then it goes really gray and dark. And then it's just like black.
And I think she even said, like, thanks for saving my life.
Yeah. And she's like, you just saved my life, you know, and it was.
Or the other one,
absolutely insane.
You know, I'm thinking that it's just smoke and like big debris, but when someone's like, I had to like dig stuff out of my mouth.
Out and like get a passageway in my throat. That for me, I was like, in the world is even happening? Let's talk for a little bit about the Pentagon and kind of that whole scenario, because I feel like that didn't get a lot of attention because of what happened at the World Trade Center, but there was definitely parts in the book surrounding the Pentagon that I was just shocked by. So yeah, did anything specific stand out to you guys about the Pentagon sections, or really make
I mean, because I was so focused on New York City on that day, like, I don't think I realized the scope of what really happened at the Pentagon. Like, I mean, I knew that a plane flew into it and I knew that it was a big deal, but I just don't feel like I realized what a massive experience that was for those people as well. I don't know. In my mind, it was so much smaller. I mean, it's still horrible and horrifying, but because I was so focused on New York and the people that we knew down there, and I had been there, I don't know, it was just such a big thing to me for New York. But yeah, so it was really interesting and heartbreaking to see. Like, it was a major deal. much, much, much bigger than I thought it was. So that was eye-opening to me. The carbon monoxide, like
yeah.
the content of carbon dioxide and oxygen, like you're in 33% oxygen right now. I'm like, holy moly, that's like, you should be dead.
Great.
I used to have a really bad headache.
That's crazy. That's
it was amazing to me, the fact that they hit the wedge that had just gone through the reconstruction, and that if it would have hit anywhere else on the building, it would have gone completely through the entire building. But the fact that it hit that one specific wedge, one, there weren't as many people in the building, and two, it only went in so far because they had just redone it. And I'm like, what are the odds that, what are the odds? But
I like the part in the book, it's page 98, where Donald Rumsfeld, he's
Secretary of Defense, I believe.
Moment there. When the plane hit, I love his, like, I went, and all the people are like freaking out because he's going to go look. And he's like, well, I just went to see what was amiss. I'm like, of course you went. Just calmly go over to where a plane just flew in the building just to check it out. Oh, but again, the number of people that went towards it, that went to help, that went...
The descriptions of the things that they saw, that for me was probably the most nauseous I got reading this book. Like, maybe it's because where the fires were at in the World Trade Center, nobody could get to them, or they didn't survive if they did. And so we don't hear those stories of what was, what the fire was like, but we hear those stories about the Pentagon and what the people going in, what they saw. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. I remember what I was going to say about the documentary. It came to me. Towards the end of it, it might have been one of the military guys or one of the police officers or somebody said that if you don't deal with trauma, mental trauma, with therapy and like handle it within 5 years, it will manifest in a physical way. And so they said, the 9/11, and it says in the book, 9/11 tore through the Arlington Fire Department like a bowling ball. It just took people out because they could not cope with what they had witnessed and what, like, they couldn't keep going. And I think that for me, like, yes, there was loss of life, like massive loss of life, but there was also loss of life in the mental field as well. And, livelihood. And it was so much more than just physical death that happened. It was so much mental trauma that happened that day that was just unbearable. So... all right, let's talk about one of the things that was new information to me. I've never been to New York. I don't know the geography of, where the World Trade Center was at. and all of that. But one of the things that I had no idea even happened was the maritime rescue effort that happened. Like, what in the world? And then, of course, I looked it up and I'm like, well, yeah, that makes sense, you know.
And there's is it on YouTube that Tom Hanks narrates that talks about it? I gotta find it. Maritime rescue, but it is the biggest maritime rescue since World War II, or it was even bigger than World War II.
And seeing like, or hearing the stories about how they would just like break into yachts and like commandeer them and just like took them.
I'm like, you go
take all these people. And then after they got the people out, they would get supplies in that way because the roads were such a mess. They couldn't get, you know, I don't know. That to me was just like, oh, it's called Boat Lift, Sarah says.
There we go. She's on it.
So yeah, like that to me, I had no clue that even happened. So, and all the ferries and anything. Yeah.
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
I haven't watched that one yet. I need to watch it.
Oh, good. It's not
Yeah,
very
the like logistical side of my brain is like, how do they clean all this up? Like, how? Like, hearing that like the fires were still going till December, I was like, how did New York function for like half a year without?
It
like,
didn't.
It didn't. Yeah.
That was something I had no idea about.
And
yeah, it was a long time.
I was just like, all that steel, like, where did they put it all? And the fact that they had to sort through it, they couldn't just like bulldoze it and be done because they were looking for remains and like evidence and all of that. It's just.
I watched the Women of 9/11. It was on this week, and one of the people is a forensic anthropologist, and she felt like her duty was to help sort through these remains and help identify, and she said by going through that, she said she's a completely different person. Like, I can't imagine.
Yeah. Well, that's the coroner was saying, like, we ordered 5,000 body bags, not realizing that most of our work was going to be DNA. Mm-hmm. Like, oh my goodness. Yeah, I can't.
Did did anyone else cry?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe a little.
Chris is like beginning to end. Just
it takes a lot to make me cry. It was a blubbery mess.
As soon as it was, I've listened with the audiobook and the recording of the flight attendant who was on the plane.
Oh my gosh.
Voice, and she was like, people are stabbed, we're gonna die. I was like, oh my God, just hearing her actual voice and that recording of her and the whoever she was talking to, the airline person, I was
probably
couldn't handle myself.
If you go to the 9/11 memorial, they like you pick up a phone and you listen to so I have gone there. I was there like maybe 3 years ago. So I didn't cry as much with the book because I'd gone there and I got it all out, like lots of sobbing there. But yeah, to hear that voice and hear, it's one thing to read the words, but another thing for all those, your nonverbals of that tone and it's just scary.
Yeah.
I think that's something that the documentary is bringing to light too. It's just like the faces of these firefighters, like their fear that you can see on their face, and yet they're ready to go and do what needs to get done. That like power, like it's powerful. It's so powerful.
Yeah. And like you hear over and over, like that was our job. We did our job. This is what we're paid to do. Yeah. We're just doing what our job is. And I'm like, okay, but like I feel like there's a limit somewhere, and for them there isn't.
There isn't.
There's no limit.
The part that made me cry is when it was one short sentence, but she's a Holocaust survivor who was at Auschwitz, and she said that it reminded her of the ashes, and I'm like, whoa.
The smell. As soon as I smelled it, she's like, I could tell what the smell was immediately. Yep. Like that flashback.
New, yeah.
Ugh.
The other interesting part I thought, because remember this was written in 2019, Page 416 is talking about years later. The trauma, drama, and tragedy of 9/11 forever affected those it touched, altering the course of the country, launching the United States into two wars that continue to this day. Again, 2019. With children of those who first invaded Afghanistan in October of 2001 are now eligible to serve and be deployed to continue fighting the same war. Like, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Ugh.
It's like how it's just so apparent how it has affected and will continue to affect generation after generation. You know, how many men joined the service because of this event? Like, this was the catalyst for them joining, and then their children decide to join, and they, you know, and it can become a family thing after that. And yeah, it was super impactful.
Yeah.
The section that probably had me crying. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Krista.
No, go ahead. It's okay.
Oh, I was going to say the section that had me probably crying the most was the like page and a half chapter on jumping.
Yeah.
That for me was like, and there's part of that documentary I was talking about. There's a certain part of that too, that they have video footage in the lobby of the North Tower. And on the video, you could hear the bodies hitting the roof.
Oh my God.
It was like, that was a part. I'm like, I had to pause it. And I'm just like, I can't.
I can't right now.
I know. There's another, I think it was an interviewing the people who went in and got Osama bin Laden. And they did not expect to come back out. Their expectation was, we're going to go in and kill him and we're going to probably be killed. And some people had asked, like, well, then why are you going on this mission if that's the end game? And he goes, it's for the woman who dropped her kids off at daycare that morning and went to work and decided to jump off the building rather than get burned at 2,500 degrees, and was conscious enough to pull her skirt down so that she could have dignity. That's why we're going to do this. And I'm like, Matt shows me this as I'm at work. I'm like, why are you doing that?
Why are you doing this to me?
Or like there was a firefighter that died because a body fell on him.
Yes.
Like I was like,
fatality was because somebody landed on him, and I'm just like,
crazy.
What in the world? Like,
and just the numbers, like the different people in it saying, I lost 30 of my friends. I went to 60 funerals. I'm like,
that was the other thing for me, that I was just like, the firefighters that were like, you almost became funeral fatigued.
Yeah.
Because you were going to so many wakes and funerals and you just didn't have it in you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it just, oh my goodness.
Right.
There was one of the women of 9/11. I think there have been a few different episodes, but one of the episodes that I watched, I think they've been airing on ABC, for anyone that's interested. But there was one, and she lived in Canada, and she was a widower, of someone who had died. Sorry, those are my children acting like animals. But she was a widow of someone who had died, and he was on like the 106th floor. And she basically was like, I will never know if he jumped or if he didn't. And like, I will never know, like, really how he died. And, and she's kind of had to come to grips with that, but she's like, it wouldn't matter to me either way, sort of thing. But it's just like that unknown of not even knowing, like, what these people, like.
Well, I remember, so after the fact, a couple months late, like, I went to New York City the next year, and I went in Trinity Church, which is right near where the Twin Towers, and I think it was mentioned either in the book or in the documentary, it's where Alexander Hamilton is buried. And there's a tree that stayed alive through this whole thing. Like, it's amazing this church had so little damage, being so close to everything. But in there and all around the city, really, but especially down at the bottom, near where this all happened, there was like the chain link fences and like pictures of people, and like, how people set up a memorial like at different sites, but it was like everywhere you turn And in this church, they had banners that different school kids had made, and like all hanging on all the balconies all the way around were all these banners and letters and pictures of people. Like it was so hard. I mean, the memorial now is so well done, but like that quick memorial that got set up over the next couple months was just like the most powerful thing, and heartbreaking, because people just didn't, like you said, Amanda, just didn't know, like for so long, because like people who did survive or were evacuating the buildings, like they just had to get out, and not everybody could get home quickly or even communicate with home quickly. So people just didn't know, like people had to go to the hospital, and so it took a long time for everybody to get information about their loved ones, and some never did. But that was super emotional to see. And there was I think someone mentioned it, going to the memorial in the winter time, and it was snowing and so quiet. But like I went before the museum was set up, and it was just the fountains that are the size of the buildings, and all around it is the names engraved in metal all the way around it. And even just when that was the only thing they had before the museum was finished, there was such a respectful silence on the grounds. It's amazing, because you're coming from New York City, which is like taxis and cars and noises and people, and then you walk like 10 feet and there's trees, and it's beautiful, this beautiful park-like setting, and you walk over there and everybody is silent. People are like touching names and just quietly walking around these fountains, and everybody was quiet. And it's just like it was beautiful to see how respectful and emotional it still was for so many people. Like, I don't know anybody that was in the towers at the time, but I mean, there was like little flowers stuck into names at different.
That's like, I think it's when it's their birthday. They put a flower.
They put flowers.
Yeah, I went to the museum and it was equally silent. Like,
yeah.
Quiet. Gloria, did you say you were? No. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Was it quiet too when you were there?
Super quiet. Like no one, like barely whispers.
Yeah.
Silence.
Yeah.
Did you do the audio tour with Robert De Niro?
I think so. I can't remember.
Or you can download it on your phone and listen to it as you go through. Oh my God, he does an amazing job. But
yeah.
And I think I was down there for maybe an hour, and I finally said to my friend, and I'm like, I just
can't. Yeah. I haven't been.
So I'm like, I just need to go outside. Like, no. So
I haven't been through the actual museum yet. I don't know that I could.
Bring a box of tissues if you do.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Or 3 or 4. Knowing you, Krista.
Yeah. It's not something you would do like before going to a play, or you'd have to have like, this is your event for the day, and then you just need to go get grabbed and take out and go back to your hotel and like do nothing. Yeah.
You need some,
it has to be like
after.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how go ahead.
Oh no, you go.
No, you go.
I was just gonna say it was a similar reaction for me. Well, not similar. I haven't been to the one yet, but I feel like it will be the same as when I went to the Holocaust Museum in DC. It was the same type of feeling. Mm-hmm. I took 4 hours to go through that, and I did nothing else the rest of the day. Like I did my DC.
When I went there,
stuff on a different day.
It was pouring rain, and it just felt appropriate that it was pouring and sad out But yeah, I've gone to both, and very similar.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, Gloria. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say the other emotional parts for me that like really got me is because I think I'm such a my personality like doesn't like the unknown, and so I really connected and related to family members and like the wives who would get these random phone calls from people who eventually died, and they just had no idea what was happening, and that was like really hard to listen to. Mm-hmm. And then the other one was I think also a really big eye-opening is how many people in the book mentioned that they prayed. Like so many people were praying. And it's very interesting because I'm like, if 9/11 happened right now in 2021, I'm very curious to think how many people who would survive would be like, I was praying the whole time. Because I feel like the world is different now. But it was very interesting to know and to hear so many people were praying. So
I also want the view of our country that happened on September 12th to come back, please.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Please.
So different.
Unity and that, like,
we're all in this together.
I did find it interesting, all of the congressmen and senators, like all of them and their perspectives and how they didn't know and how they all just came together.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Absolutely. And I feel like that was the other thing too in watching that documentary, and even in the book as well, and it's not mentioned in the book, but you see it in the documentary, is how big of an issue like things like race and religion and divisiveness has become part of the media's doctrine, I'll say, over the past 5 years. And going through, watching the documentary, reading the book, all of this, like nobody cared. It was, you are a human, you are a person. We're all in this together. We're all here together. We're taking care of each other. Nothing else matters. And I feel like when push comes to shove, like that's what humanity is. And same thing with the praying. It's like when you hit rock bottom, you have nowhere else to look. Like you have nowhere else to go. And so people try to take care of themselves until they can't. And then they're like, well, crap, now who's going to help me? And sometimes that's what it takes. But yeah, that story of the woman that was just like praying and praying and praying. And she's like, I got out of that building and my life has been
completely different.
Focused on that. I got married to my husband. We're super like into church. We're, I've just been really trying to focus on living my life towards God. And like how much that changed her, knowing, I survived this for a reason. And I feel like that's something that a lot of those, especially the people that were buried or like got pulled out of stuff or were hit with it, like that had more serious injuries. They're like, okay, I survived this for a reason. Now what? So yes. Okay. Amy, absolutely agree with this.
Yeah.
That was super, super hard for me to read. And I feel like when they were in the buildings, it probably wasn't that way because they had no idea what was happening. But the little girl who's, her best friend was like, I can't be your friend anymore. My mom said I'm not allowed to play with you. Like, wow. Sharon Says So, who's an Instagram account that I know a bunch of people follow. She made a comment when she was talking about the Taliban and everything going on there. She made a comment to me that was not to me on her thing, but to me, it was very, very enlightening and eye-opening. And she said, we really need to be careful when we talk about Al-Qaeda and the Taliban in not labeling them a Muslim organization. Because she goes, just like they are an organization that is mostly made up of Muslims, the KKK is an organization that is mostly made up of Christians. And so on their website, they will say, we are a Christian organization. But how many Christians actually believe that? And how many Christians would be super not happy about being lumped into that group, And so her whole thing was like, you have to really be careful of your language when you're talking about some of these extremist groups, that you're not labeling them to a specific country or religion or race or anything like that, because that is not who makes up an extremist or a terrorist group. It is a group of extremists who feel this way. And so that for me was really, really eye-opening. And I've like had to call my husband and different people out on that when they'll talk about, well, they're the Muslims, and I'm like, no, this is not the way that most Muslims feel. Like, and we need to get that doctrine out of our heads. But yeah, sorry, that was my soapbox for the day.
Soapbox moment. I love it.
Welcome to my TED Talk.
I think there was just so much fear that stemmed from that day because there was so much that was unknown and there wasn't communication and we were just learning from the news. And so we didn't know, like, as it was happening, is it finished now? Like, okay, then the Pentagon, okay, now is it done? Nope, now there's Flight 93. Okay, now are we done? Or is there, like, there was a lot of unknown that we were just depending on the news to tell us, like, when it was done, but people didn't know, like that, like you said, someone about they evacuated the buildings in Chicago because there was just so much unknown. And so I think from a place of fear, you say things or believe things even that aren't true because you're coming from that place of fear. And it was a legitimate fear, but not really the best outcome, like not the greatest choices.
Well, and
on a personal like relationship level with the people around you. But
even now, like I remember going to again to Lambeau Field for a football game, thinking, well, this would be a great place. 60-some thousand people here. Like post 9/11 world, that's I can't help but cross my mind of what if.
And I think that's part of society now is that we're always looking for the what ifs. You know, especially with, you know, the mass shootings and, you know, like different events that have happened over the past 20 years. Like we have been conditioned to think to like always be on edge. And I feel like, and some people let that consume them and really live in a state of perpetual fear. And I feel like we have to realize that, you know, God did not give us a spirit of fear. You know, he doesn't want us to be naive and stupid either, but that is not of God. And that's something that I have really tried to embrace is like, I cannot live in fear. I'm not going to like live under a rock or put myself in intentional danger or, you know, there's a difference. But yeah, I don't know.
It's crazy. Well, I have to go and take kids to further events for the day.
Thanks for joining us, Lindsay.
Thank you for having me. This was a really good talk.
Oh, and haircuts
and soccer game, all kinds of stuff. I feel like this was a good therapy session. I feel like this is a good follow-up to the book. I was telling a couple of people, I'm like, make sure you have somebody to talk to because
yes,
you need to talk to it. So,
oh my goodness.
Thanks for the invite, Gloria. So awesome to see you. Kristen, Amanda, it's always awesome to hang out. But I will see you guys later.
All right, bye, Lindsay.
All right.
Let's quickly touch on Flight 93, which I know for a lot of us is like all the tears and is really, really difficult to talk about, but is yet one of, I feel like, the most impactful moments of the entire day. So I know that the phone calls that were coming out of the plane just, but like, how proud of these guys. Like if you're their mom, you're getting these phone calls, you're their wife, you're getting these phone calls. Yes, you're terrified, but like how proud of, like, I don't know. That's what I was thinking is like these wives that are like, you go get them, take them down. You got to do something, take them down. And we're like cheering them on. Like that to me is the ultimate, like, oh my goodness.
Just the fact that they did something. I feel like so many people just sit back and let things happen and don't speak up. And the fact that in this scary situation, and they didn't necessarily know yet what else had been going on. I think some of them were told on the phone, but they only know their situation and they realize that their plane is being hijacked and they're like, okay, we got to do something. Like, what are we going to do? Oh man. And when the mom said that her son and the other guy were sitting like in between where there was two guys in front of them and two guys out, I'm like, oh my Loretta. Oh golly. Yeah, this was an emotional part for me hearing those phone calls. And
airphone operator who got the phone call, and then he's like, I want you to call my wife and tell her this. And she's like, I can't do that. Like, what? I can't do this, you know? But then the fact that they were able to like bond over that and help each other heal, you know, through that. And like, what a gift that he gave his wife somebody to help her heal.
Yeah.
Like, those are the like little things that I think of is the way that you can see God's hand play in just little minute ways throughout this horrific tragedy. I also found it really, really interesting that the crash site was like the biggest evidence spot of the whole thing. Like they
That
were
was
able
interesting
to
too. Yeah.
get so much evidence from that specific spot. That to me was new information. Like I had no idea that that was a thing, or that the ground literally swallowed the plane, like because it was so soft.
I also didn't realize that there were bombs on the plane. I definitely just thought it was the planes going into the buildings. I didn't realize all of the
I didn't
planes.
realize there were bombs on the planes.
Didn't they say that in all the calls? It was that like that's why the fires.
Oh, I think they thought there were bombs on the planes.
Oh, there weren't. Okay.
I don't think there actually were. I think it was just the jet fuel. And my husband, when I was talking to him about this, he brought it up because my brain doesn't work like this, his does. But he said they were really intentional about choosing flights that were transcontinental. So they were going from coast to coast. So they were big planes with a huge tank of fuel. And they crashed them really close to their takeoff location. So they hadn't used much fuel by the time they crashed.
Oh,
They wanted it to crash with the largest amount of fuel they could possibly get. And they chose planes because jet fuel burns at such a high temperature that that's what was going to take the buildings down. Because those buildings were built to withstand fire, but not over 1,000 degrees, you know? So
good to know. I see. I didn't even know.
yeah. And I didn't, like, my brain doesn't work that way, but he had pointed that out, and I was like, that's a really good point. It sounds like I have a herd of elephants in my, I don't know if you guys can hear that or not, but
I'm gonna have to go too. I just got word from my brother that I can use my ID to pick up his pain meds. So
all right, well, let's go ahead and wrap it up really quick. So yeah, if anybody wants to list, the only thing I was going to say is go ahead, and if you have documentaries or other books that are related to this that you would suggest or recommend to other people, feel free to list those in the comments. And then I will try to go through the comments and put it in the description of the video once it posts. Because I've written down a few people have mentioned different books and documentaries and that sort of thing. But yeah, we really, really, really appreciate everybody showing up this morning and taking the time to discuss this with us. And I hope that it opened your eyes to a different perspective of the day. And yeah, I think that's it. Definitely appreciate Gloria and Krista and Lindsay joining me. Yeah, definitely go check out their channels. Gloria, your channel is just your name, right?
Yep.
Gloria is
Thompson.
Huh?
I should probably have a bookish thing, but I wasn't clever enough.
No, but how do you pronounce your name?
Gloria Zaitsev Thompson.
Zaitsev. Okay. That's what I thought it was, but I
always wondered how to say it too. I was like, Z something.
Yeah, it's okay. You just call me Gloria. It's fine. But thanks so much for hosting and for having me and for setting up this.
Absolutely. I hope this was beneficial for everybody, and I hope you take time today to reflect on everything, and I hope everybody has a fantastic rest of your weekend.
Yeah.
And
let's chat about it.
Right.
It's always good when it's so emotional to have people talk about it.
I know, right? It's like you need to process. It's a lot to process for sure. So
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much, and we will see everybody later.
Bye.
Bye.